Reform UK has accused Vodafone of facilitating the invasion of Britain after it emerged that the company supplied free SIM cards that were given to channel migrants. Care for Calais' annual report shows that telecoms giant Vodafone gave 2,500 SIM cards to the refugee charity to hand out to those who arrived in the UK on small boats. The report also showed that the charity distributed the majority of the cards to occupants of the Wethersfield migrant camp in Essex. Well, joining me now is Reform UK spokesperson for Home Affairs, Zia Youssef. Now, Zia, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, there you go. This is GB News Originals. I'm Emily Carver. Please do give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And do leave a comment. Let me know what you think.
This afternoon. Now, you say that you'll actually bring in something called Polanski's Law, making it a strict liability offence for people to perform any act that assists or encourages legal entry into the United Kingdom. So tell me more about that and why you feel so strongly that you feel that Vodafone are encouraging, as it were, this.
Well, look, I think the British people are rightly outraged that a company of the size and scale of Vodafone is handing out SIM cards to military-aged men who they know are breaking into Britain. That is precisely what Vodafone have been doing. Thousands of these SIM cards. That is aiding and abetting illegal entry to Britain. That is putting British women and girls in danger. We know British women and girls have been raped, sadly, on all too regular occurrence by illegal migrants. Now, I wrote to the chief executive of Vodafone and to the whole board of directors. And as I said, number one, a reform government will bring in what we call Polanski's Law. So that makes aiding and abetting illegal entry into the UK a strict liability offence. Now, what that means is a prosecutor does not have to prove intent. They will only have to prove that the actions actually happened anywhere inside the organisation. And the result of which, if Vodafone did this thing under a reform government, is the whole board of directors would go to jail. So that's the first point. But yet we're not yet in government. So what I'm also telling them is that unless they cancel those SIM cards and assure the British public they will no longer take part in this outrageous act of aiding and abetting the invasion of this country, then a reform government will immediately review all of Vodafone's public contracts, of which there are many. And I'm also more than willing as Home Secretary to immediately exercising the powers the Home Secretary has under the Immigration Act 1971, all of the foreign nationals on the board of Vodafone, again, of which there are several, would have their visas revoked. They would be unable to enter the United Kingdom. The era of these gilded elites operating by their own rules and virtue signalling at the cost and immiserating hardworking British families will soon be over.
Well, see, some might say that those who are on the board of directors might not actually have any power to change that, so they might have to go along with this even if they disagree with it. And they may also be, potentially been born in this country, but ultimately were foreign nationals, I guess, in a sense. So some might say that, well, what if the board of directors, they don't all have power to change things?
They do, Banana, they do. Look, I've served on boards before. I came from the world of business. I'll tell you that one group of people who can and should be held responsible for the action of Vodafone are the board of directors. And by the way, you know, the legal mechanism we're talking about here is not novel under English common law. It is exactly the same legal mechanism that, for example, governs financial crime. It's exactly the same standard, that strict liability standard. That's not something we invented. It already exists. What we're saying is serious financial crime should be, look, aiding and abetting the illegal entry into this country, endangering British women and girls, undermining our rule of law. I think that's an outrageous thing for any company to do, let alone a company the size of Vodafone. I'd encourage, frankly, all of your viewers who currently are customers of Vodafone, given that Vodafone are doubling down, perhaps reconsider whether you want to be a customer and funding this sort of nonsense. But no, I'm afraid the board of directors are directly responsible and they will be held accountable by a reform government for their actions.
OK, but then, you also mentioned, and I know this is an argument people often say, but I have to put it to you, that British women are raped by British men as well, So I hear what you're saying, that we are importing more, but some might argue that, well, it's all very well for you to say that, but the majority of rapes have happened by British men, actually, not people who've arrived here via dinghy.
Yeah, so there's two responses to that. The first one is two words: per capita. Now, obviously, the governments, Tory and Labour governments, have done their best to hide data around crime and sex crimes in particular. But we know now, for example, this is MOJ data that we do now have thanks to investigative journalists. We know that, for example, Afghans are meaningfully, anywhere between 10 and 22 times more likely to be convicted of a sex crime than British nationals. And if you look at the nationalities of the people coming over in these boats, it is invariably nationalities which I'm afraid have a far higher per capita, i.e. per person, likelihood of committing sex offences. That's the first answer. The second part of the answer, Nana, is of course we know British people commit offences and sex offences too. But here's the point. The people committing the offences we're talking about should never have been allowed in the country. And therefore, every single one of those sex offences, those rapes, those murders, those thefts, every single one of those is directly downstream from Tory and Labour politicians being unwilling to secure our border.
But look, how far do you go? Because Vodafone would say that we are helping a charity, Care for Calais, and they're a registered charity who look after refugees. And, so Vodafone would say that we're doing our duty. Also, how far do you go? What about Serco? Serco, massive contracts in the government, putting all these migrants up in HMOs and all sorts, making an absolute fortune. The human rights lawyers, who are also, in a sense, by, if we go with how you're seeing it, they're also aiding and abetting, aren't they?
Yeah, well, look, in terms of how far we go, we're going to make this a strict liability offence, and I couldn't be clearer. Yeah, we're going to uphold the law. And I know there seems to be, particularly on the left now in this country, you've got platforms like the news agents and all these left-wing platforms sort of saying that's not what a Home Secretary is there to do. A Home Secretary is not there to actually uphold the law and send people to jail for aiding and abetting illegal entry. No. That's actually precisely what a Home Secretary is there to do. It's just that we haven't had a Home Secretary that's actually done that, frankly, in decades. Now, you've got to go back a long way. So in terms of how far we go, we will pass that law, and make no mistake, we will be judicious. We will be relentless at hunting down anybody who aids and abets illegal entry into this country. And if you do that, you will go to jail.
Welcome to Britain Underneath, where we peel back the polished gloss of Westminster to expose the raw mechanics driving the nation. Before we dive into the deep end of the parliamentary stream, take a moment, stay informed, and subscribe to Britain Underneath. Your subscription genuinely helps this channel grow, keeps independent commentary alive, and ensures you never miss a beat of what truly goes on behind closed doors. The British political establishment has long prided itself on stability, continuity, and a quiet sense of order. Yet, beneath the surface, the traditional party dynamics are fragmenting in ways that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. The electorate is no longer bound by ancestral loyalties or standard party lines. Instead, voters across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are increasingly volatile, demanding immediate answers to systemic crises that have been decades in the making. Take a breath and consider the sheer weight of the economic legacy currently hanging over Downing Street. Inflationary pressures may... When citizens look at their payslips and then look at their local high streets, they do not see a grand narrative of national recovery. They see a system operating at maximum capacity while delivering minimal comfort. This gap between political rhetoric and daily reality is precisely where the nation's political landscape becomes intriguing. In Parliament, ministers insist that long-term strategic plans require patience, caution, and fiscal constraint. But in the court of public opinion, patience is an increasingly scarce commodity. The public wants visible, tangible progress, not technical explanations from Whitehall mandarins. Meanwhile, the opposition benches present a picture of intense manoeuvring. Conservative strategists are locked in an ongoing battle to define what the right of British politics should look like in a post-statist era, attempting to appeal to suburban moderates while keeping an eye on the rising tide of populist movements. To their right, populist figures are capitalising on every administrative failure, framing every government compromise as a betrayal of public trust. The traditional two-party monopoly, which held British democracy together for over a century, is under more strain than at any point in modern history. If you are enjoying this deep exploration, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button right now. Supporting Britain Underneath helps us continue producing high-caliber analysis without pulling punches, and encouraging others to subscribe keeps our community informed and growing.
Consider also the situation across the devolved administrations. The political calculations in Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast add layers of complexity that central government often underestimates. Regional economies are demanding distinct solutions, and the historic constitutional debates surrounding devolution and unionism are far from settled. Every decision made in London echoes across the nation, often triggering unintended consequences that reframe national debates overnight.
What makes the current moment so captivating is the sheer speed at which narratives shift. A single policy debate regarding local planning laws, welfare reforms, or energy strategy can ignite an overarching ideological battle within hours. Backbenchers, once expected to fall silently into line behind the party whips, are increasingly willing to assert their power, knowing that thin parliamentary margins give small factions immense leverage over executive decisions. The executive branch finds itself managing a perpetual balancing act. On one hand, international markets demand fiscal prudence, regulatory predictability, and steady leadership. On the other, electoral constituencies often demand dramatic change, counterbalanced by groups invested in continued. On the other hand, the domestic electorate demands bold intervention, tax relief, and immediate investment in public services. Satisfying both masters simultaneously is an almost impossible administrative exercise. When a government tries to please everyone, it frequently pleases no one, leaving itself vulnerable to charges of indecision and drift. Yet, amid all the procedural drama and media commentary, we must ask the deeper question: what does this mean for the structural future of the United Kingdom? We are watching a political system adapt, often painfully, to a changing global order. Foreign policy challenges, energy transitions, and global market shifts are no longer distant matters discussed in international summits. They directly affect the price of goods on supermarket shelves and the stability of British jobs. Power in Britain is shifting from traditional backrooms to dynamic public arenas. Citizens are far more informed, far more critical, and far less forgiving of political theatre. They see through the polished speeches and focus on the practical outcomes. When a government promises reform, the public expects measurable results, not mere legislative ambition. As we navigate through these turbulent political waters, staying informed is no longer optional, it is essential. The decisions made in the corridors of power over the coming months will shape the nation's economic and social trajectory for decades to come. Understanding the underlying forces, the hidden strategies, and the quiet power plays is the only way to truly comprehend where Britain is heading next. If you value thorough, mature, and uncompromising political analysis, make sure to hit the subscribe button right now. Stay tuned and join our growing community of informed viewers. I encourage you to watch every video straight through to the very end so you never miss a critical detail. Thank you for watching Britain Underneath, and make sure to subscribe and return for our next deep dive as we continue to unmask the true mechanics of British power.